Yeah, well, let's dig in. Hello, everybody. I'm David Cooks, and I tell you what, we know that paralysis can take on many forms. It can be physical, like mine. It can be
do anything you put your mind to.
And what we try to do is feature stories that go from difficult places to fulfilling purpose.
What seems impossible can be done by you.
He's a performance coach. He's a sports coach. He's a wonderful speaker. He's a podcast host. And, he's just kind of a good dude.
It may knock you down, but don't let it stop you.
I want to welcome Jordan Montgomery, the CEO and founder of Montgomery Companies, to the podcast.
What story do you want to tell? Because every round of decision making, every decision that we make is one day a part of the story that we tell. And I think when you connect the dots to small decisions, having a huge impact on your story and your legacy and your future, it informs us. It allows us to take a different path, or to at least slow down and really discern the decisions that we're making, and to think about those decisions in a deeper way.
Got so much to give, a lot of life to live. You must go from paralysis to purpose.
Get your pen and paper out.
Yeah,
I'm taking notes.
Paralysis to purpose.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast. I'm your host, David Cooks, and I say this every time. I am the most fortunate guy in the entire world. I get to talk with some of the most intriguing and inspiring people that live on the planet. And today is no exception. You're in for a great treat. This guy is a wonderful speaker. He's a performance coach. He's a sports coach. He's a podcast host. He's very successful. He's a family man, and he's just kind of a good dude. And that's what I think you're going to find out today. And so I want to welcome Jordan Montgomery, the CEO and founder of Montgomery Companies, to the podcast.
David, it is such an honor to be with you, man. I think about all the conversations that we've had over the years. This one, we get to have in a more public way, but I value your friendship, and I'm honored that you would take the time to spend with me on your podcast. So thanks for having me.
Well, I'm glad. Hey, I'm glad you said yes.
I wouldn't miss it, man. Come on, I wouldn't miss it. This is fun.
To get on your calendar is a great thing. So, as you know, we talked a little bit before we started today. Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast, really takes a look at individual journeys, and sometimes even corporations that have to go from difficult places to places of fulfilling purpose. And you're no exception to that. And I was looking at something on one of your social media sites earlier this month, and it was 6 years ago, April 1st of this month, that you went through a very difficult time. And I want you to share a little bit of that with our audience today. And then we're going to talk about where you've gone from there and what you've done from there, because I think the message is that you can make a mistake and you can fall down, but you don't have to stay there.
But one of the things that I've learned, like in my journey and my story, is God doesn't always deal with you in the same vein. And more importantly, sometimes his preparation is packaged as pain. I don't think he causes things to happen, but I think he does sometimes allow things to happen. So I was 27 years old. This is my story. I think we all have a story, by the way. We all go through difficult things. It's part of being human. You're either going into a storm, you're in the storm, or you're coming out of one. That's just the cycle of life. So I don't know where we find you today if you're listening to this conversation, but at 27 years old, I was in the middle of a storm. I worked for a large financial firm. Before the storm, I was in the penthouse. And overnight, I went to the outhouse. For those listening, at the time, I had a full bank account. I would say a fair bit of relational clout with people around me. God had given me a position of influence. And I was not stewarding my influence well. I was running fast. I was making quick decisions. One of the decisions that got made was the inability to turn in or confess to a staff member that had taken a test on my behalf in the financial services business. So if you're familiar with that business, that shouldn't happen. It does happen, but it shouldn't. It was a mistake that was not confessed to. And because I didn't turn that in, it actually, for a period of time, cost me my job. Now, God put things back together. I won't go into all the details, but the side part of this story that made it so difficult is I was building a house. I was involved in a large real estate project. The project went sideways, bank called a loan. And because of some of those circumstances, almost overnight, I went from the penthouse with influence and authority in my space, and a full bank account, to days later being on the doorstep of bankruptcy without any kind of direction or future. And for a young man that found all of his identity in his success and his achievement, that experience hurt way more than it ever should have. So that was the story, at 27 years old. And at the end of the day, I still have my health. I still have my future. I still have my faith. The cool part of this, and David, you know this, but I'll just add this because I think it's important. God prepared me to be a father and a husband in the midst of that season. Mm-hmm. And that's why I say he doesn't always deal with this in the same vein. So while I lost some things, there was a lot that was added. Okay. And he was preparing me to be a husband and a father. And he had to deal with some things inside of me before he could do some things with me. And I can look back now and say that was a blessing. I learned a lot, and it repositioned me for a greater future.
What was your thinking at that time? What led you? Did you have a sense of right and wrong and all of that kind of stuff, and you did it anyway? Would help us with that, like, because you came to a point and something happened.
Yeah. Well, I would say this: a casual spirit creates casualties.
Wow. So
a casual spirit creates casualties.
I was going to tell you to say that again because that's really good.
Yeah. So if you're casual,
okay,
you're kind of moving through life. Nothing's too big of a deal. I'm not going to be overly intentional. People will give me grace. I'm just going to run at my own speed. I'm going to do my own thing. That creates disappointment. It creates loss. It creates hurt, and it creates damage. And so there wasn't a malicious spirit inside of me. It wasn't like I was trying to do wrong, but I did wrong. And as leaders, we say all the time, we say, well, that was not my intention. Okay, well, your intention doesn't matter. What hurt someone, what caused the disappointment was your action. And so the intention is irrelevant. And I needed to learn that my actions were speaking louder than my words. I couldn't just use my silver tongue. I couldn't just use my charisma or charm to unwind a situation. And up until that point in my life, I had done that. I would just I'd be okay with a disappointment here. I'd let somebody down, or I'd do the wrong thing. And people give me grace. I'm just going to keep moving. And I was casual about my behavior. So you say, what were you thinking, David? I wasn't thinking. And that was the point. That was to my detriment. So I learned, and Andy Stanley has this most powerful question. He says it's the most powerful question that we could ask in our life. He said, if people would ask this question, it would keep people from getting divorced. It would keep them from getting fired. It would keep them from getting, into trouble, going bankrupt, losing a friend. The question is, what is the wise thing to do? What is the wise thing to do?
I want to go back to something else you said that I think is really powerful. You said your actions override your intentions. Mm. Are you suggesting that we should live our lives in such a way that what we do has a positive impact on others? Do we live to make sure our actions are positively impacting? Because if they don't, your intent doesn't matter.
That's right. That's right. Well, and I think it's slowing down to ask two questions. Number one, we just talked about it. What is the wise thing to do? Not could I do it? Not should I do it? But what is wise? Mm-hmm. And for our listeners, I would ask that question in three different ways. I'll be asking that question in terms of my past experience, my current circumstance, and my future hopes and dreams. So what is the wise thing to do in light of my past experience, my current circumstance, and my future hopes and dreams? In other words, it might be okay for someone else, but it might not be okay for you based on your future hopes and dreams. As a single person, it might be okay to be in certain environments that are not okay for me as a married person, given my current circumstance. So I think that's a powerful question. The other question that more directly addresses your point is, what story do you want to tell? because every round of decision making, every decision that we make is one day a part of the story that we tell. And I think when you connect the dots to small decisions, having a huge impact on your story and your legacy and your future, it informs us. It allows us to take a different path, or to at least slow down and really discern the decisions that we're making, and to think about those decisions in a deeper way.
You talked about being above reproach. Being above reproach. Why is that so important?
Well, I think it's especially important if you are a leader, and I would guess everybody listening to this call is a leader. I subscribe to John Maxwell's definition of leadership, which is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. Leadership is influence. So if you have influence over your children, if you have influence over your friends, if you have influence even over a couple of people in the workplace, well, then by definition, you're a leader. And people are watching you and they're taking notes from you, and your actions affect a lot of other people. And so, I think it's not about us, but it starts with us. And, I like to give this analogy. There's this illustration, because I talk a lot about a lot of things, David, where I just had a speaking engagement this morning, and, in every audience, and I know that you can relate to this as somebody who communicates publicly for a living, there's certain people you can tell they just sort of start to tune you out, right? They're like, I've heard this before. Be positive, lead others, have a great mindset, read every day. Man, I've heard this before. Come on, and they're kind of sitting there like, well, first off, life is not that easy. I've heard this before, and I don't really need to do anything different than what I'm doing today. In fact, I'm going to take some days off. I'm okay being 70% of who I was made to be. I'm going to go to work, get a paycheck, go home, love my kids. Enough of all the other stuff. I'm just trying to live my life, be content. I'm just going to keep to myself. Well, to that person, I would say this: you are the pilot of your own plane, and you get to decide if you want to fly that plane slower. If you don't want to use all of your potential, that's totally up to you. And you might get to your destination a little bit later, but we must not forget there's people on our plane that will miss their connecting flight. And that's why it matters. That's why being above reproach, going the extra mile, the empty mile, going where people haven't been, putting in the extra effort, paying attention to the details matters. It's not about us, but it starts with us. And if you want to live a life of significance and lead a life of impact, then I believe it's incumbent upon us as leaders to do the little things that matter.
And I want to talk about the power of a second chance. When you hear that, what does that mean? And what advice would you give to our listeners about the significance of a second chance?
Well, I think about stewardship and grace, because at the end of the day, I think we've all been given a gift. You have a unique gift, David. I think God's given me some unique gifts, and I can own that, and you can own that as a believer, and realize that, first off, that the gift you've been given is bigger than you. And the gift that I've been given is bigger than me. And while some things were temporarily altered or changed, the one thing that someone cannot take from you is your God-given giftedness. It was given to you. Now, God could take it from you. He could change that, right? He is the creator and keeper of all things. So if he wants to alter those circumstances, he could. But the natural abilities that God gave you, people aren't going to take that from you. So my situation was altered. My circumstance was altered. I think about your story. Your circumstance was altered in a significant way. But God has not taken your pride, your confidence, your energy, your enthusiasm. In fact, you have an energy and an enthusiasm that so few people have. And I think some of that has to do with the brokenness that you've experienced. Being really broken is actually a powerful position, because you're willing to listen. to the voice of the Lord. You're willing to listen to the people that you trust. You know, it sounds cliche, but it's like sometimes you don't know that God is all you need until God is all that you have. Mm-hmm. And your life's been flipped upside down. And my life was flipped upside down. And so in that moment, I think you start to realize, okay, well, I still have my health. I still have my gifts. And I can use my gifts for good. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to use them in a way that honors God and makes a difference in this world. And when I think about a second chance, I think I started to learn that I need to apply my gifts the right way. That was maybe one of the biggest lessons in my second chance.
Because everybody doesn't get a second chance. I think we need to put that out there.
It's true.
Because it doesn't happen for everyone all the time.
That's true.
But when it does, I think to capitalize on it and understand the gifts that you have, and you shifted our conversation into purpose right now. Mm-hmm. And part of purpose, I believe, first of all, is to serve other people. But secondly, your purpose is connected to your natural giftings. And you will use what you were naturally gifted with to fulfill your purpose, which will impact and serve others. That being said, on the journey from paralysis to purpose, there are three things that I'd like for us to focus on. I'm going to mention some words, and I want you to tell me what they mean to you on your journey. Perspective.
Perspective.
In relationship to the journey from paralysis to purpose, what's the role of perspective in that?
Yeah, well, I think perspective fuels our purpose. You know, how you view what you do changes how you do what you do. Mm-hmm. How you view what you do changes how you do what you do. And so I can choose to see myself as a business leader, a speaker, motivator, coach. That is my professional identity. That's not my real and true identity. And that is perspective, right? My true and real identity is father, husband, child of God. Mm-hmm. And that perspective, I think, informs my action and my purpose. So that's really deep. I mean, that's really heavy, but really, I believe that. It's like how you view what you do determines how you do what you do. And so if you are an accountant, if you're a mortgage lender, if you show up to work and say, I'm a mortgage lender, well, you're probably not going to be very effective. But if you show up to work and say, I am a lover of people, I'm a friend, I'm a lid lifter, I'm going to lift the lid of the potential on the people around me, I'm going to be the most positive person that my audience interacts with daily. I'm going to give people my time, my attention, my support, my empathy. I'm going to give them counsel. I'm going to give them everything that I got because I'm a child of God. You know, I'm a friend. I'm a lover of people. Then that changes the way that you perform, the way that you show up for others. How you view what you do changes how you do what you do.
In my book, Getting Undressed from Paralysis to Purpose, I have a quote in there that says, how you see a thing will determine how you would address it or how you attack it. And so you're absolutely right. I believe that your perspective drives everything in your life, your performance, your attitude, everything. And it also will impact the ceiling you place on your life. And you should not place one if your perspective is right.
So good.
So
good.
The second word, perseverance.
I think part of perspective and part of perseverance is saying, okay, this is my circumstance. These are the cards that I've been dealt. I'm not in charge or in control of all the cards that I've been dealt, but I do have a right. I have an obligation and candidly an opportunity to play the heck out of the hand that I'm holding. Mm-hmm. And that's perseverance. Okay. So I don't have pocket aces. You know, I'm 7-10 off suited, or some people might be 4-2 off suited, right? They're like, I am 4-2 off suited.
What are you talking about? Is that a card game or something?
It's a card game. It's poker. It's poker. Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. You're talking about.
Hey, so if you know poker, the cards you want pocket aces. Okay. Now there's some people, you look at some people and go, well, that person's talented. They're good looking. They're a gifted communicator. You know, they were born into a family with money and influence and life has come easy. And you say, oh, that person has pocket aces. And we all know people like that. And then you see other people, it's like, man, they were born into a rough situation. They don't have a lot of natural ability. Life hasn't come easy. Maybe they got sick. And so you could say, well, I have a 4 and I have a 2. And they're different suits, right? I got spades and clubs. Well, I don't have pocket aces, but the person that has a 4 and a 2 can still play that hand. You don't have to be out of the game. You don't have to fold your cards. It's like, no, you know what? I'm going to play my 4 and my 2, and I'm going to put some chips on the table, and I'm going to do everything that I can with the cards that I've been dealt.
There you go. Got it. Understood. So one of the things I keep referring to this book I wrote. There's 2 things that come to mind when you said that. One of the things I love to say is, as long as there's time on the clock, you can influence the game. And so your responsibility as a team player in the game of life is you play until it says 0-0-0. And you give it everything you have. And the other thing you talked about early on was difficulty, and you can't be thankful for everything that happens to you, but you can be thankful in everything that happens to you. And that's 2 totally different things. And that's where that perseverance and perspective thing comes in.
We'll get back to this conversation with David Cooks and Jordan Montgomery in just a minute. This episode of Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast, is sponsored by Fallon Upe, strategic advisor, investor, and best-selling author. During this quick break, we wanted to share a clip from David's new audiobook, Getting Undressed from Paralysis to Purpose. In Chapter 14, David's journey comes full circle as he returns to his alma mater, Marquette University High School, now as its varsity basketball coach, diversity director, and economics teacher. David recalls how in the classroom he drew upon both his banking and coaching experiences to teach important lessons about economics and life.
Teaching allowed me to take diversity and life talks to whole new levels. Students coined the word theologicon to describe our class. I could discuss issues of race, walking privilege, economic disparity, supply and demand, STDs, and, of course, faith and scripture, all through the lens of capitalism. If there was a student who had a problem with money, profit, or wealth, I gave them the option to give me their money to illustrate that I was a capitalist who didn't support the classic model of wealth redistribution. However, I did want them to understand the social responsibility of everyone looking beyond themselves in order to help others with whatever was in their lunch bags. I leveraged economic principles to teach broader life lessons. Some of them had straightforward connections to the class. For example, never pay full price for anything. Never. Others had looser connections. Always stop at the red light. My one-liners inspired students to create the What's Cooking board, a compilation of some of my quotes and sayings from classes throughout the years. Some were serious, others downright ridiculous. Only drink 100% juice. Save the bones for Rufus Jones, 'cause Rufus don't eat no meat. Keep fooling around. You got one more time. One of my favorites was, if enough people tell you that your breath stinks, you should get a mint. My reputation as a tough but fair teacher grew, as did demand for my classes. In fact, taking one of my classes was voted as one of the top 10 things to do as a Marquette High School student before graduating. The classroom was really where I wanted to be. I loved coming to class every day and was ready for more. I also loved my other classroom, Humphrey Gymnasium.
That's David Cooks narrating his book, Getting Undressed from Paralysis to Purpose. It's now available to purchase from Audible and Apple's audiobook store. Now, let's return for part 2 of David's conversation with Jordan Montgomery.
The last pillar of that journey is something I know that you really are great at, and that's partnerships. Let's talk about how partnerships help us. The thing I love about life is that you're not on the journey by yourself. And I love that. So I want you to share about partnerships in your own life and your own experience and how significant that was for you on your journey from paralysis to purpose.
Well, I believe when first off, when you go through tough things, I believe that there's people on your path that meet you there. And there was a lot of people on my path that met me there, that they met me in the valley. And I can't even make sense of that. Radical generosity, people who loved me, cared for me, prayed for me. I know there's people that prayed for me that I never even knew prayed for me. And the same is true in your journey, right, David? Just people that prayed for you, cared for you, that you never even knew prayed for you. So people, and God uses people. He doesn't have to, but he chooses to influence us and to grow us. There was a social psychologist from Harvard. His name is Dr. David McClellan. And he said that 95% of our success or failure in life is a direct result of the people that we habitually associate with. So if you hang out with 9 criminals, you'll become the 10th. If you hang out with 9 people who are positive and abundant, you'll become the 10th. So people influence our lives in a radical way. And our environmental game is the beginning of personal development. You talk all the time about development and leadership and growing and changing. And somebody asked me, I said, what's the true beginning of personal development? First, I would say self-awareness, understanding yourself. But then right after that, I would say environment. And Ed Milet has this famous quote that I love. He says, your environmental game drives your mental game, and your mental game drives everything else in your life, but it starts with your mental game. And to illustrate that, because everybody's had this experience, you go to a conference, you go to a seminar, maybe you go to a musical performance or a sporting event, and you're in a certain environment and you're very inspired. And you're thinking to yourself, when I get home, I'm going to start working out way more. When I get home, I'm going to start really making more sales calls. When I get home, I'm going to write that book. I'm going to do that thing that I've been putting off. I'm going to have my best year ever. And then you get home from that event, and all too often what happens? Your life just sort of slowly returns to normal. So what happened was the environment that you were in was supporting the thoughts that you had. And when we took you out of that environment, your thoughts changed. Your environment is the people, places, and things that consistently show up in your world. It's the partnerships. You are one of my partners. You're one of my friends. You're one of the people that I respect. And you have added significant value to my life. And you are also, I would define you this way, David, you are a go-giver. You operate without strings attached. And, our world places very little expectation on people to live that way. Here's the question. This is what I'll say to wrap this point about partnerships. I want to build partnerships with people who are asking this question. What does love require of me? What does love require of me? Because to love someone, to be someone's partner, the best partnerships, I believe, exist when both parties are asking that question. I'm going to sacrificially love my brother or my sister or my spouse or my child or my friend because I love them. And that means I can do something kind and I don't need something in return. I can show them grace and they don't need to show that to me. I can go out of my way for them and they don't need to go out of their way for me. You are that person. You will check in on me even when I don't check in on you. You will extend me grace even when I haven't extended the same grace to you. You will show me love even when I haven't shown love to you. And when I think about like the top 5 or top 10 relationships in my life, they're all relationships like that. There's no tit for tat. We're not keeping score. It's a true partnership where somebody says, I care about you. I love you. And this is what love requires of me. It requires of me to treat you this way. And there's somebody listening that thinks that's a really mushy, lovey-dovey thing. Like what I just said, they're like, whoa, that was a little warm and fuzzy. But you think about it, that's the question that changed the world. Mm-hmm. That's how Jesus treated people. That's how he operated. And if you're not a Jesus person, if you're not a Jesus follower, that's fine. Fill in the blank of the leader that you most respect and most admire. So to me, when you say partnership, that's what I think about. I'm curious. I'm going to throw a question back to you. I know this is your show, but I don't care. I'm going to break the rules. I'm going to break the rules. What do you, when you think about partnerships, what do you think? I want David Cook's response to that. What do you think about?
Well, I just think about the people that are there who have been assigned to you to move you forward in your purpose. And however they do that, it can be a challenge, it can be an encouragement, it can be discipline, it can be disagreement, it can be agreement, whatever it is that they are doing to support you and move you forward. That's how I define partnership. I talk about 4 guys in my book who I still talk to this day, who helped me get through high school. They were assigned to me after the spinal aneurysm to help me have a great high school experience. And to this day, I still talk to Bob, Bill, Jan, and Jim. To this day, I talk to them. So that's what partnership means to me, is that the great thing about the journey of life is that it doesn't have to be lived alone. When God said, since we have so much theology on this podcast today, when God said back in the book of Genesis, it is not good for man to be alone, that had multiple layers of significance and meaning. And part of that meaning is partnerships for the journey that we're on. And so that's what I think of when I think of the 3 things that have helped me get to where I am today. It's the perspective, it's that perseverance thing, because you can't quit. The one thing you can't do is quit, because when you quit, you don't fulfill. Any other questions that you have for me?
That was a great, well, that's what we refer to that in our world as a mic drop. That's great.
It's a mic drop, but sometimes you don't want to drop the mic because you might have more to say, but we won't.
This episode of Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast, is sponsored by Fallon Upe, strategic advisor, investor, and best-selling author.
We hope you're enjoying Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Paralysis to Purpose for more updates. Also, check out David's website at davidcookspeaks.com to learn more about his mission and purchase his book, Getting Undressed, From Paralysis to Purpose.
We're about to wrap it up. I have so many other things. I was taking notes as I was talking to you. And I really want to spend just a little bit of time, if you can, on the importance of reflection and how that helps self-awareness and why that's so important. You're a big growth versus outcome kind of guy, and how you measure success, if I can say it that way. I wanted just to help us with reflection and how important that is, and how that can impact your movement.
Well, that's a loaded question. And you asked these great questions, David, with tons of depth. I think in my life, every year, probably, I look back at the previous year and I think, wow, I really was clueless last year. I mean that. I mean, I really, I'll evaluate, why did I say that? Why did I do that? I made this decision, or I said this dumb thing. Sometimes it's in my personal life, sometimes it's professionally. And I kind of hope that never stops, because as long as that keeps happening, it's a sign that I'm growing. And if I don't experience that, if I look back at last year and I go, last year's kind of the same as this year, I'm not sure there's a lot that I would change. Well, it probably means that I haven't grown much, and it's kind of like a coach. And you know this from all your days coaching, you watch the game film from the previous game. And there's almost always about a dozen plays that you wish you could have back. You go, those 12 plays, it really cost us the game. And if we could fix those 12 plays, we'd be a lot better. And, I think so few people are willing to watch the game film. They're not willing to go back and really evaluate their mistakes, to feel the pain of loss or the pain of a bad decision. And they're not willing to ask for feedback. I think you've probably said this before, maybe directly out of your mouth, that feedback is the breakfast of champions. Mm-hmm. It's the one thing, if you think about it, people would say, oh yeah, it's very important. And then the next question is, are you getting enough of it? And unequivocally, almost everybody says no. So we don't know what we don't know. We all have blind spots. But I can't fix something that I don't know is happening. I can't fix something that I'm not aware of. There's a great resource on the topic of self-awareness. It's a new book by Adam Grant, and the book is called Think Again. Think Again. The entire book is about self-awareness, reflection, situational awareness. It's really a book about developing as a leader. But the subtitle of the book is so interesting. The subtitle is The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know. The power of knowing what you don't know. And this paradox of education is the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And you have such a humility about you. You operate with a confident humility. That's the spirit of David Cooks. But I know that comes from a lot of reflection, a lot of feedback. And you're constantly working at becoming more self-aware. And those who think they're really self-aware are usually very unaware. If somebody says, "Oh yeah, I was coaching an executive leader recently." He says, "I didn't come really aware until about 10 years ago. That's when I really started to become self-aware." And I'm thinking, my goodness, this guy is one of the least aware people that I know, and he thinks he's self-aware, and therein lies the issue. So reflection's important. Self-awareness is important. It's the beginning of personal growth and development. Anything that you would add to that? I'm going to flip that back on you.
I wrote a couple things down here, and it's not to plug me or you, even though if you're looking for an executive coach, hit us up. But the reason you need a coach in your life is because you can't see your blind spots. Because if you could see them, you wouldn't need a coach. And that's where a coach, every person should have someone in their life who's coaching them because of the blind spots. And so that's pretty important. The second thing you said, I interviewed Coach Jim Johnson of upstate New York, and he was pretty successful as a basketball coach. And I asked him a question. I said, once you got to the top, how did you stay there? And he said, growth. Growth keeps you sustainably successful. And he said the problem with teams is when they got good and they still had the guys coming back for another season, they didn't get any better. And that was the demise of their greatness. So growth will keep you successful. Before we leave, Jordan, how do people reach you if they're interested in having you be a speaker, or if they're interested in your coaching? You do group coaching, executive coaching, performance coaching, sports coaching. We didn't even get into that. But how can they get a hold of you?
Our website, and I appreciate the question. Our website is montgomerycompanies.com. My email is jordan@montgomerycompanies.com. I would welcome anyone to reach out. We're fairly active on social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Reach out, send me a message. I will respond to anyone who sends me a message. Would love to engage, would love to add value. And we try to make ourselves accessible and available. And so we will welcome any questions or conversation from any of the listeners.
That's fantastic.
Well, hey, before we wrap this up, let me make I'm gonna make a public commitment with some listeners that are on. So you need to know this. If you've listened to David and I's conversation, David and I have shared a unique friendship for probably, it's been 3 years, 4 years. Is that right?
Yeah, probably about 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's one of the things I appreciate most about you. As long as we've shared this friendship, you've asked me to read your book. And I have not read your book, which is a tragedy in and of itself. It makes me sad to say that out loud. But here's what I appreciate about you. You're willing to share the truth, and you're okay reminding me that I've not done that. And we'll sign off this way. You talked about self-awareness. You talked about reflection. We talked about perspective and purpose. And somebody needs to hear this today, that truth trumps flattery. Truth trumps flattery. A friend who is willing to give you the truth is a valuable friend.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate your friendship, and I appreciate your willingness to always give me the truth, to be a friend who provides feedback and who cares for me. And that means a lot.
But I appreciate everything you just said. So make sure you guys reach out to him. Check him out. He's a good dude.
I love you. Thank you for having me. This was so meaningful, David. And I appreciate your friendship more than you know and more than I can probably put into words. And this was really special just to hang with you today and catch up and share a conversation.
Fantastic. Well, Jordan, thank you for joining us today on the podcast. And until the next episode of Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast, I'm David Cooks reminding you that your ability to endure is always greater than your willingness to endure.
You can do anything you put your mind to.
Thanks for tuning in to Paralysis to Purpose. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Paralysis to Purpose on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. To purchase his book, visit davidcookspeaks.com. Be sure to tune in next time for more inspiring conversations with David Cooks.
And, I felt like if I did drop out, I'd have, no place to stay, no money, nothing like that. But I feel like my mom kind of went through the same thing when she first came to America.
Next time on Paralysis to Purpose.
Michael Phillips. He's made sacrifices all throughout his life to get him to the point where he is today.
She didn't have a phone, couldn't read, illiterate. And, she just got dropped off at JFK Airport with no money, nothing but the clothes on her back. And, she was able to find her family and then, make a life for herself. So I felt like if she could do something like that, there's no excuse as to why I can't take the risk.
Paralysis to purpose.